Welcome to Anshika's Academy. This is chapter number 7 of the Tamil Nadu Board History. Chapter number 7, Revenue Administrator and Economics Policy of the British. There are mainly five topics that we are covered in this chapter. First, the British agrarian policy, different land revenue systems introduced by the British, the merits and demerits of the revenue administration, British policy towards the handicraft industry, or 5 causes for the decline of the Indian handicraft. British agrarian policy. It is a well-known fact that India is primarily an agricultural country. The overwhelming majority of its people depend on agriculture for sustenance. If the crop is good, prosperity prevails, otherwise it leads to famine and starvation. Till the 18th century, there was a strong relation between agriculture and the cottage industries in India. India was not only ahead of the field of agriculture than most other countries, but it also held a prominent place in the world in the field of handicraft production. The British destroyed handicraft industry in the country while unleashing far-reaching changes in the country's agrarian structure by introducing new systems of land tenure and policies of revenue administration. India's national income, foreign trade, industrial expansion, and almost every other dominion of economic activity dependent on the country's agriculture. The British policies revolved around getting maximum income from land without caring much about Indian interest of the cultivators. They abandoned the age-old system of revenue administration and adopted in their place a ruthless policy of revenue collection. After their advent, the British principally adopted three types of land tenures, roughly 90% of the total area under the British rule. Bengal, Bihar, Banaras division of the northern western provinces and northern Karnataka were brought under the zamindari system or the permanent settlement. The second revenue system, called the Mahalwadi system, was introduced in about 30% of the total area under British rule in major parts of northwestern province, central province, and the Punjab with some variations. The Rohitwari system covered about 51%. 51% of area under British rule, comprising part of the Bombay and Madras presidencies, Assam and certain other parts of British India, the permanent settlement. Lord Cornwallis' most conspicuous administrative measure was the permanent land revenue settlement of Bengal, which was extended to the provinces of Bihar and Odisha. It is appropriate to recall that Warren Hastings introduced the annual lease system of auctioning the land to the highest bidder. It created chaos in the revenue administration. Cornwallis, at the time of his appointment, was instructed by the directors to find a satisfactory permanent solution to the problems of the land revenue system in order to protect the interest of both the company and the cultivators. It applied the Governor General to make a thorough inquiry into the users, tenures and rents prevalent in Bengal. The whole problem occupied Lord Cornwallis for over 3 years, and after prolonged discussion with his colleagues like Sir John Shore and James Grant, he decided to abolish the annual lease system and introduce a decennial 10-year settlement, which was subsequently declared to be continuous. The main features of the permanent settlement were as follows. The zamindars of Bengal were recognized as the owners of land as long as they paid the revenue to the East India Company regularly. The amount of revenue that the zamindars had to pay to the company was firmly fixed and would not be raised under any circumstances. In other words, the government of East India Company got 89%, leaving the rest to the zamindars. The ryots became tenants as they were considered the tillers of the soil. This settlement took away the administrative and judicial functions of the zamindars. The permanent settlement of Cornwallis was bitterly criticized on the point that it was adopted with undue haste. The flagrant effect of this arrangement was that no attempt was made ever either to survive the links or to assess their values. The assessment was made roughly on the basis of accounts of previous collections, and it was done in an irregular manner. The effects of this system both on the zamindars and ryots were disastrous, as the revenue fixed by the system was too high. Many zamindars defaulted on payments. Their property was seized and distress sales were conducted, leading to their ruin. Riot. The rich zamindars who led luxurious lives left their villages and migrated into towns. They entrusted their collection to agents who exacted all kinds of illegal taxes beside the legal ones from the riots. This has resulted in a great deal of misery. This had resulted in a great deal of misery amongst the peasants and farmers. Therefore, Lord Cornwallis' idea of building a system of benevolent landlordism failed. Baden Powell remarks the Zamindar as a class did nothing for the tenants. Though initially the company gained financially in the run, the company suffered financial losses because land productivity was high. Income from it was meager. Since it was a fixed sum, it should be noted that in pre-British period a share of the crop was fixed as land tax. Nevertheless, this system proved to be a great boon to the Zamindar and to the government of Bengal. It formed a regular income and stabilized the government of the company. The Zamindars prospered at the cost of the welfare of the tenants. Rohitwari settlement. The Rohitwari settlement was introduced mainly in Madras, Berar, Bombay, and Assam. Sir Thomas Munro introduced this system in the Madras Presidency. Under this settlement, the peasant was recognized as the proprietor of land. There was no intermediary like a zamindar between the peasant and the government. So long as he paid the revenue in time, the peasant was not evicted from the land. Besides, the land revenue was fixed for a period from 20 to 40 years. At a time, every peasant was held personally responsible for direct payment of land revenue to the government. However, in the end of this system also failed under this settlement, it was certainly not possible to collect revenue in a systematic manner. The revenue officials indulged in harsh measures for non-payment or delayed payments. Mahalwadi settlement. In 1833, the Mahalwadi settlement was introduced in the Punjab, the central provinces, and parts of northwestern provinces. Under this system, the basic unit of revenue settlement was the village or the mahal. As the village lands belonged jointly to the village community, the responsibility of paying the revenue rested with the entire mahal or the village community. So the entire land of the village was measured at the time of fixing the revenue. So the Mahalwadi system eliminated middlemen between the government and the village community and brought about improvement in irrigation facility. Yet its benefit was largely enjoyed by the government. British policy towards Indian handicrafts. The European companies began arriving on the Indian soils from 16th century. During this period, they were constantly engaged in fierce competition to establish their supremacy and monopoly over Indian trade. Not surprisingly, therefore, initial objective of the English East India Company was to have flourishing trade with India. Later, this objective was enlarged to acquire a monopoly over this trade and obtain its entire profit. Although the trade monopoly thus acquired by the company in India was ended by the Charter Act of 1820, yet the British policy of exploiting the resources of India continued unabated. In this respect, the nature of the British rule was different from the earlier rulers as far as the traditional handicraft industry and the production of objects of art were concerned. India was already far ahead of the other countries in the world. The textiles were the most important among the Indian industries. Its cotton, silk, and woolen products were sought after all over the world, particularly the muslin of Dhaka, carpets of Lahore, shawls of Kashmir, and the embroidery works of Banaras were very famous. Ivory goods, works and jewellery were other widely sought after Indian commodities. Apart from Dhaka, which was highly famous for its muslin, the other important center of textile production were Krishnanagar, Chanderi, and near Banaras, dhotis and dupattas of Ahmedabad, chicken, chicken of Lucknow, and silk borders of Nagpur had earned a worldwide fame for their silk products. Some small towns of Bengal, besides Malda and Murshidabad, were very famous. Similarly, Kashmir, Punjab, and western Rajasthan were famous for their woolen garments. Besides textiles, India was also known widely for its shipping, leather, and metal industries. Indian families and industrial economy rested on cutting and polishing of marble and other precious stones and carving of ivory and sandalwood. Muradabad and Banaras were famous for brass, copper, bronze utensils. Nasik, Pune, Hyderabad, and Tanjore were famous for other metal works. Kutch, Sindh and Punjab were known for manufacturing arms. Kolhapur, Satara, Gorakhpur, Agra, Chittor and Pahalgad. Pahalgad had likewise earned a reputation for their glass industries. Packing of gold, silver and diamond jewellery was another important industrial activity in which many places in India specialized. These entire handicrafts industries indicated a vibrant economy in India. Despite enjoying such fame in the world, the Indian handicraft industry had begun to decline by the beginning of the 18th century. There were many reasons for it. First, the policies followed by the English East India Company proved to be highly detrimental to the Indian handicraft industry. The Indian market was flooded with the cheap finished goods from Britain. It resulted in a steep decline in the sale of Indian products both within and outside of the country. In 1769, the company encouraged the cultivation of raw silk in Bengal while imposing service restrictions on the sale of its finished products. In 1813, strategies were devised by the company to enhance the consumption of finished goods from Britain. In this respect of tariff and octroi policies were suitably modified to suit the British commercial interest. To cite an example, in 1835 only a minimal import of British duty of 2.5% was imposed on the import of British manufactured cotton cloth, whereas a very high 15% export duty was charged on Indian cotton textile as per the new maritime regulation. Moreover, goods from England could only be brought by the English cargo ships. As a result of all these policies, the Indian textile could not enter the British market, whereas the Indian market was flooded with British goods. Thus, with the rise of British paramountcy in India, the process of decline in the power and status of Indian rulers had set in. Thus, the demands for the domestic luxury goods like royal armory, and objects of art by the Indian royalty also reduced drastically. So, with the disappearance of the traditional dynasties, their nobility also passed into oblivion. This led to a sharp decline in the demand for traditional luxury goods. Besides, the industrial revolution led to the invention of new machinery in Europe. Power looms replaced handlooms in India. Also, the advent of machines led to the decline of handicrafts, as now the machine-made products were available at cheaper rate and more goods could be produced in much lesser time. Finally, the new communication and transport facilities brought about a revolution in public life. Earlier goods used to be transported either by bullock carts or by ships. Thus, during the rainy season, it was not always convenient to carry on with the normal transportation, but now conditions were changed with the introduction of railways and steamer services. Concrete roads were laid to connect the country's agricultural hinterland. The import of goods from England also increased with the simultaneous increase in export of raw material from India, leading to massive loss of job among Indian artisans and craftsmen who lost their only means to livelihood. Learning outcomes of this chapter is the objective of the British agrarian policy, the permanent settlement, Rohitwari system and Mailwari system of land revenue, the economic impact of British land revenue administration, the Indian handicrafts industry and its importance, British policy of exploitation, the decline of the Indian handicraft industry due to the industrial revolution in England. That's we cover the chapter number 7 of Indian Tamil Nadu Board History, Revenue Administration and Economic Policy of the British. Thanks for watching.